Welcome everybody back to the DomCast episode 23, where tonight it is just me. Yes, I will say right off the bat, go ahead and expect some of these podcasts to A, be shorter as the playoffs get shorter, and B, be in randomly placed times. So as you'll notice, had one on time last week, then I did the one on Friday as I said I would, the playoff predictions. This one is coming out on Monday as expected. It kind of lined up with all the game ones happening back to back over the weekend. But just a heads up, depending what happens in the playoffs, pending interesting results and or interesting things that I see, you might just get some on random days. So I just say that because I didn't really plan on having one today, being that the last one was Friday, but here we are. And it's because I want to talk about game ones. Before I do that, rule number one, have to remind y'all to, if you are enjoying the podcast, rate it, Spotify, the little star button, YouTube, the like button, Apple Podcasts, also a star button, I guess. I don't know what y'all rated on there, but I appreciate the reviews. Well, I feel like I had something else important to say, but there's actually a lot of important things to say, so I'll get around to whatever is slipping my mind at the moment. I'm gonna start in order. Oh yeah, I can already tell you there's like at least two games I don't really have a whole lot to say about. I caught at least a piece of every game this weekend, but some of them I flat out didn't care much for, so I either used that time to rest up a bit, and I haven't gotten to review maybe some of the important things about them, but it's mostly for the series that I don't care much about anyways, so that might not really matter. Let's start in order. The playoffs kicked off with a game that I'm gonna assume most people skipped. I think a lot of fans were not interested in a Luka Doncic-less Mavericks and Jazz series. Or opener. So, however that ended up happening, as we theorized, calf strains do not just magically heal. I saw, and I don't mean to poke fun at Dallas fans on Twitter, but I saw a lot of copium. I saw so much copium going around about what was going to happen, and people over exaggerating his injury, and I was just going, man, we've seen this movie before. It's not really an over exaggeration. It's just kind of how these things go. And not only has he missed game one, he is slated right now to miss game two, which I am sure takes place tomorrow. I'm recording this on Sunday night. Pretty sure. Either way, as we thought, Scott probably going to miss the first two games. So how did that affect game one? How on the mark were we with some of the things that we talked about in the predictions? Let's go through all that right now. First of all, so with the information we have with Luka, I picked the Jazz to win this series in 6 games, accounting for maybe Luka coming back at not 100% or him just missing the series flat out. That's what that prediction entailed. Other part of that is watching game one, I'm going, damn. I'm crying if I'm a Dallas fan, because if they had Luka, this would be a sweep in favor of Dallas. And I don't say that just as a simple analysis of, oh, they barely lost without him, so there's no way the Jazz could compete with him. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Just the fact that if you listen to the tail end of me and Heat Check talking about that series, the end I kind of caught it, and when, well, yeah, Spencer Dinwiddie and Jalen Brunson are probably still going to be doing a lot of the same things that Luka tries to do. The difference is you don't have to double those guys. But as far as generating open looks, because Gobert is in a drop, and they are very obviously, the Jazz defenders are very obviously not going to get over screens. I feel like they can still generate some of the same offense that they do even without Luka being there. They did that. They did that for a lot of the game. They were able to get some floaters up. They were able to get a lot of 3-pointers, especially in the first half, and more or less stay in control of the game for a limited time. And that's the part that's not too hard to predict, right? When you're missing an MVP talent like Luka, you're gonna run out of gas eventually, because Spencer Dinwiddie's got to go to the bench, which leaves you with one shot creator, one playmaker, which is Jalen Brunson, and it's not even like it's an elite level playmaker. Brunson's good, but when you're down to him as your only option on the floor, kind of tough. That happens at points in the game, A. And B, even when you have Spencer Dinwiddie doing so, it's kind of like, yeah, it's just the best we have right now. It's also not ideal. So they were still able to get their shots, but you're missing very obvious other things, such as, lobs to Dwight Powell, which would be interesting to see if they would get in this series. I sense that they would, because if you had Luka running those screens, he would definitely be able to engage Rudy Gobert a little bit more than some of the other guys will. I'm sure, even though Rudy did a hell of a job protecting the rim, I think he would be caught in the middle a little bit more. You'd see more usefulness for a Dwight Powell. And also you're missing Luka's step backs as well, which is just an option, right? Because you have that option, then everything else moves down the line in terms of Spencer Dinwiddie 3 or Dorian Finney-Smith 3. Those things become, all right, yeah, we can do that too. Those are just other options that you have. Right now, they're pretty much totally dependent on those things. And so Dallas was able to get away with it for a while, but it also took some help from the Jazz side. And I don't want to discredit Dallas's defense, but the Jazz were missing hella shots. They were missing a lot of shots. Donovan Mitchell was having, for him, a historically cold start to a playoff game. So it was kind of, once you got to around the end of the second quarter, I was able to go ahead and peg that the Jazz were probably going to win this game. I just didn't feel like they were going to stay cold enough long enough. And I didn't feel like Dallas was going to be able to sustain what they were doing without Luka Doncic. That's what it is. They can get to some things that they like, but sustaining it is the hard part. That's why we always say the playoffs are for superstars. You got to have a superstar player or multiple superstar players, because you can be a good team all you want, but at the end of the day, which by the way, this is going to come up in another series we talk about a little bit later. Like you need your guys. So another thing that Utah was able to do, they went to Bogdanovic, who was able to get many good looks just by posting up, ironically. He kind of was keeping them in it at a point. And once these shots started falling, the Jazz were able to take control of it a little bit. Of course, went cold again. Dallas was able to get back into it, but it ended close. It ended closer than you wanted it to end, which is in line with what we all think about Utah right now. What I think about Utah, that they are an unserious contending team. There's still the fact that yes, this game did end close, and I think even game 2 could end close. It depends. What if Utah comes out and they actually hit some of their shots? That might stop that scenario from happening. But yeah, it didn't, game 1 just did not really inspire confidence. It's exactly the things we saw with them in the regular season. I think it'll look better once you come into game 1 and they get off to a better start. It won't look quite as bad as it did. But because you had that, and you had Dallas being able to just do what they regularly do and get the looks that they wanted, it was pretty much, oh gosh, speaking of getting looks that you want, I kind of forgot. Should I talk about the play-in at all? I think we kind of missed that. Yeah, I didn't get to talk about the last play-in games because Trae Young put on a show. It doesn't matter. Whatever. We're in the playoffs. I might get to it at the end. I might briefly discuss those at the end. Anyways, Utah escapes with game 1. No Luka in game 2. And I think that Utah will walk away with the 2-0 lead. I really do. I still see, well, not still. It's a new thing since game 1 just recently happened. See a lot of people in my mentions saying, oh, well, if Utah gets out of this series. And I think they will. If you just watch game 1, Dallas has to, they have to hang on for dear life, basically, is the thing. Even if they get a 7 or 8 point lead, they have to hang on to that. They have to sustain a lot of things that are just very difficult. You have to do that. If Luka is not on the floor, you have to do that for a good amount of time. I think that's going to be the cause of them dropping both their home games. But if they don't, they don't drop both their home games and they're able to get Luka back at some point in the series, that makes things interesting, because now the question is, where is Luka physically? Yeah, because look, if they had him on the floor, Utah would just, they'd be out of here, bro. Utah would be out of here. There'd be even more open shots, but then you would have to deal with the superstar shit that Luka does too. And it would be interesting to see what decisions Luka would make in terms of getting to the rim, because Dallas, they don't, and Luka does it sometimes, but that is the last thing I wanted to mention. Rudy did a really good job in this game. Did a really, really good job doing what he is supposed to do, just protect the rim. And Dallas just couldn't get anything going for the most part throughout the entire game near that. It was like shots and floaters or nothing, which that's the part about sustaining, right? When you got to the end of that game, it felt like for some reason there was like a stretch where they kind of stagnated and went with some ISOs, and you can't, Dallas, you can't do that, bro. You don't have Luka on the floor. You cannot just go straight to ISOs. Just keep running screens. and getting at least get your open looks. Because I really think that also, especially because they barely lost, that kind of ended up costing them, that there was a stretch where they just said, all right, well, we're just going to try to create some random stuff now. You do not have a random stuff roster. This is a supporting cast roster. You did not have, you cannot do random things and walk away. But yeah, no, not inspired by Utah at all. They did what they were supposed to do. I was really looking like, damn, I knew they would catch back up eventually, but for a moment there, they had me. I was going, damn, are y'all really going to let Dallas get game one? And Spencer Dinwiddie's not even making his free throws. This is kind of tough. Well, that's my thoughts for Dallas and Utah going forward. I think Utah should get both games, but we shall see. Because, I don't know, maybe Utah will come out and be colder than they were, or they'll stay cold. And then, Dallas builds a solid lead because they got a bunch of open threes. And bang, tie series, right? That would be fucked. Eventually, I think Luka will come back. So we'll see what happens with that. The game that took place after that, wow, I saw a lot of basketball this week because I just tried to get an image in my head of what I watched after that. There we go. This is Memphis. I almost said the Memphis Timberwolves. It's late. The Memphis Grizzlies and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Oh boy, Cat pulled up with the smoke. So if you did listen to the playoff prediction podcast, I was talking about Cat and how he didn't really inspire any confidence in me with his 2018 playoff run and what happened with the play-in. I fully acknowledged how much the Clippers really deterred him, but also that it shouldn't really have been that easy to deter a player with his skill set and how he's got to be smarter, yada yada, right? I did the whole thing. Here's the part about that. Memphis, I'm not sure, and it's going to be really, really interesting to see what they come with in game 2. Because I'm not sure, and this is what'll be answered on NBA TV, by the way. Game 2 was on NBA TV, go figure. What adjustments Memphis is going to be able to throw at them. Because having Steven Adams out there is an issue. So the Clippers are able to do is just take small bodies like Rocco, Nick Batum, guys that are playing forward, but they're part of small ball lineups. So we're able to put them on primary defenders as Cat, and then have Zubac just kind of roam or have help just roaming and immediately show him the body, soft doubles, that type of thing. It's tough because Steven Adams does not move well, not quick, and Jaren Jackson fouls a lot. Even though he is a good defender and he blocked a hella shots in a short amount of time, even throughout the season he almost averages around 4 fouls per game. He fouls quite a bit. So yeah, the problem is twofold. You can go, all right, well, let's get Steven Adams off the floor. Let's run Jaren Jackson at the 5, Brandon Clark at the 4, and maybe try to duplicate something that there's some of what the Clippers did. But because Cat is really aggressive in this matchup, and that was the main thing, as cliche as it is to say, oh, I need to see a star be aggressive. That still was a thing after the Clippers game I wanted to see. He came out super aggressive. That one where he felt Ja reach for the ball and he turned the corner and dunked on Jaren Jackson. Yeah, that's the type of aggression we're talking about. And also did the same thing to Steven Adams when he overhelped on one of those plays. That's the issue, right? Pick and rolls. That was something I asked Heat Check about. That's about pick and rolls for both sides. And that's where Steven Adams particularly gets screwed. Cat sets the screen and it's D'Lo with the ball or Ant with the ball. You have Adams coming up at the level or even a little bit higher. If he comes out too high, his feet are slow, bro. His feet are slow and Cat moves like a guard. With or without the ball, that's a very quick big man. Adams don't have the facilities for this. Adams does not have the facilities for this. He is a strong guy, and if you post him up, you probably won't have a great day. But Cat is not a post-up player. He dribbles a lot. He puts the ball on the floor. He runs without the ball. Those are all things that make Steven Adams being on the floor just a tiny bit impractical. So I'm interested to see how they handle that, because once again, Jaren Jackson was fouling a lot this game as well. And what I'm worried about, that's something that was a question that I had with the matchups in the last pod we did, was, okay, well, if you do Jaren Jackson as the primary guy, last game fouled a lot. If you start having him, if you have him primary Cat and he fouls a lot, that's an issue. Maybe you go, okay, we're going to use Brandon Clark as a smaller body and have Jaren Jackson roam. That's a thought, but then I feel like it's an easy enough counter, especially with the 1-game lead. It's an easy enough counter for Finch to just go, all right, well, we're going to take Vanderbilt off the floor and stick in a Malik Beasley or something. Just fill in some shooting there. all of a sudden roaming isn't that great of an idea. So ideally, you would be able to have Jaren Jackson come in and help, but I'm not sure how long Memphis would just allow that to happen, especially because they saw something similar already a week ago. Those are all the things that I'll be looking at in game 2 in terms of slowing down Cat, because to me, that's the biggest issue. I had someone in my chat, which by the way, we're doing hella watch parties for the playoffs. They've already been crazy lit. And I was talking about the Cat coverage. One of the chatters asked, why shouldn't the question be stopping Ant? All right, look, Ant's perimeter guy. Cliche Twitter meme, he got that dog in him. Ant is gonna do what Ant's gonna do. You already have Desmond Bane on him or Dylan Brooks, and Edwards is going to find his ways to get downhill. He is going to Euro step around you when you try to take a charge. He's gonna bulldoze his way to the rim. He's gonna charge like he's going to the rim and hit you with his step backs. He's gonna take shots if he sees space. Ant is just gonna be Ant, and you already have your defenders. You already have your matchups for him. Reason I'm more worried about the Cat thing is because right now there's not a viable matchup that you have figured out. So you know, if Ant gets his 30 or 35 and he just cooked you, he cooked you. But having Steven Adams, whose feet are cinder blocks out there trying to chase Cat, I feel like that's kind of the bigger thing, because that's so clearly exploitable. We'll see if Ant continues, hot shooting or, being able to score as he did. But, while we're on that subject, that watching him grow up is incredible. In year 2, like, it's happening. I was hyped for the year 3 jump. They made it to the playoffs. Go back to some piece of content I made. This is the biggest reason I wanted to see the Timberwolves be one of the teams that made it. It's because I wanted to see them get these playoff reps. I wanted to see them get this confidence, and especially against a team like the Grizz, who are also young, it really feels like they're battling for the next great team of the West. Speaking of which, Memphis is led by one of the next best players, not just of the West, of the NBA, and Ja Morant. I made sure to mention Ja has struggled against the Wolves in the regular season. Life has been tough for him because he can't quite get to the rim the same as he does throughout the season. Those are his signature games where he's able to get 2 feet in the paint. He's leading the league in paint scoring. That's where his bread and butter is. But for Minnesota, they just have Cat come up on those screens. And you show him 2, basically. You show him 2. So whether it's a soft double or whatever it is, you make it so his only option to get to the rim is to really do something nifty and basically get between the two. Something like a behind the back dribble or a push dribble, something fancy. And even then he might see other bodies. You saw it happen in game 1, and Ja wasn't even shooting bad in the first half, but there's a lot, even the ones he made, he has to force hard to get to the rim. It's not like him and how you've seen in the regular season just getting there at will. He's got to force. He's got to get around a body. He's got to contort as hard as possible. And I think in game 1 it got frustrating because he I don't want to say he played into their hands, but at a certain point he was just like, okay, I'm Ja. I've been doing this all season. I don't care what the coverage is down here. I don't care if there's a clear body already a little bit outside of the paint that I'm gonna have to get around. I'm gonna force his layup. And they were able to get some misses. Of course, he got in the paint sometimes and he got his dunks, but it wasn't nearly as effective as it was throughout the regular season. That is worrisome to me because now that's probably 4 or 5 games between these teams where Ja hasn't really been able to be Ja. And so that's why I say game 2, I'm so excited to see what the adjustments are. He said on the defensive end, sure, but also how do you get the best out of Ja in a series like this against a team that he hasn't performed well against because of the defensive scheme? You got to figure that out. You got to figure out whatever. And I'm not the coach. I don't have the X's and O's. I don't have I don't have anything drawn up. But however they can get him going, that's going to be absolutely necessary. Because what did I tell y'all 2 or 3 weeks ago? When did I go on the little rant about I don't want to hear the Grizzlies are better without Ja takes? I was serious, because when you get to the playoffs, that's different from winning a bunch of regular season games against whatever teams you're beating. Get to the playoffs, all of a sudden there's a book and they're going, okay, this is what we're doing. And that's when you need superstars. It's when you need superstars, and you need superstars to be superstars. And so very interested to see what Taylor Jenkins does to possibly get Ja more comfortable. Maybe if he pushes the 3 a little bit more, which I feel like Minnesota wants, even though Ja has been a pretty good shooter this year. I feel like Minnesota would be happy if he was at that point basically settling for 3-pointers. Because Minnesota is happy with anything that it's not Ja just knifing his way to the cup. So it's going to be interesting. It is going to be interesting. This is one of the NBA shows I did on Twitch. Like probably a month ago, we had a film coordinator on, our former film coordinator. I asked him what's the next step in Ja's game. He was saying, oh, basically a mid-range, a legitimate or elite mid-range game to really open things up. I think that's mighty important right now, because what you see is with this version of Ja, it kind of feels like, all right, if it's not him finishing in the paint, it's using or leaning heavily into his 3-pointer. I don't think he has a real mid-range game right now that's a threat to really just go to in a moment like this where he needs to find a way to be effective. And so that really is probably the next evolution in his game, which will eventually get him MVP, because he could use it right now. He could absolutely use another way to score that doesn't, involve him having to have 2 feet in the paint, basically. Game 2 will happen on NBA TV, as we said, and right now I don't have a call for that one. I would like to think the Grizzlies aren't going to lose both their home games, but like those are 2 really, really, really big things they need to figure out. And the last part I was worried about with this is that Memphis was never in control of that game. Not for a single second they weren't in control of that game. Memphis came out and hopped on that ass like immediately, and they stayed on it. Pause. Patrick Beverley did the things he does with his energy. Told y'all, reminder number 156, I will take Pat on my team if you won't. And this was what D'Lo wasn't even that great, was he? There was at a point, wasn't he 1 for 10 or something? So yeah, Memphis got to be careful here, because this was not a case of just, oh, any team can be any team on any given night. This was a case of there's some legitimate basketball book things here that Minnesota did that Memphis might not be able to deal with. That's what that was. And so if they lose game 2, my pick will switch. My pick will, and if they lose it the same way, particularly, my pick will switch, because it's fun on these days to just go, oh, this player only had this many points, or he only played this well, and they were still hanging around, so they'll definitely win. But then you got to look at why that player played that way sometimes, and then you find out, oh yeah, it's because they were getting, the other team was giving them legitimate issues. All right, so that's what I have for Memphis and Minnesota. Series is every bit as fun as we thought it would be. Move on to Philly and Toronto, and I'm already discouraged. I'm already discouraged in this series because I thought this was going to be one of the best. Already, Joel Embiid has stepped on Scotty Barnes' foot, and it went like inward. I'm going to guess he cannot return back from that this series. Maybe if they advance this playoffs, but I don't think he'll return from something like that this series. So that's missing him. And then Thaddeus Young did something with his finger. I think he dislocated his finger. Something happened with his finger. Either way, as far as I know tonight, both of them are out of next game. Toronto's already not a deep team. They were already not a deep team. Tyrese Maxey is good at basketball. Came out and had 36 or 38 in his playoff starting debut. So that was fun, because that mixes things up quite a bit in terms of what we were talking about with our predictions. Is James Harden, I thought this would be a hard series for him to be effective in shooting wise, which I felt is important. But if you can get something like that out of Tyrese Maxey, then if you can get that as much as possible, that's great, because all of a sudden Harden shooting 5 or 15 or whatever isn't as important if he is also assisting everybody, including Tyrese Maxey, and then Maxey's either leading the team in scoring, or he's the second leading scorer. Something like that really, really helps. Raptors, even though Embiid didn't have a great scoring night, his size was clearly at the beginning of the game with how much he was getting fouled and how they were trying to cover him. Size presented a clear issue, and it was never really, that game came out of the gate with the Sixers just kind of in commanding control, and it never really went the other way. I'm not as interested in this series anymore, just because, and not that Scotty Barnes is this superstar and they have no chance without him, but they were already fighting an uphill battle. And I chose Philly in 7. I thought Toronto was already fighting an uphill battle to win it. You get shorthanded by 2 bodies on a team that's already not deep. I don't really know that they're going to be able to overcome that, especially because while Scotty Barnes is not a superstar, he is very important to that team. So in terms of things like ball handling, in terms of them being able to switch everything, because all of those guys are built like go-go gadget, it's now kind of probably going to be tough. You got blown out in your first game, you went down 2 bodies. It's probably going to be kind of tough. I would now be surprised if this ended up being that difficult for Philly, but I've seen weirder things, so we'll see. But yeah, because I'm not that interested in that series, I don't really want to talk about it much anymore. I believe that brings us to Warriors in Denver. So, Golden State and Denver Nuggets. Here's what happens. I made a video this morning. I'm not gonna lie to you, I was kind of tired when I woke up and made that video. I'm not sure if I hit the points that I really wanted to. Because the Jokic discourse has already been terrible this season, but it just went to total shit after he lost game 1. And I could do nothing but laugh, because first of all, I was going, wait a minute, I just had to kind of check where I was and check the year. I was going, did I miss something? Were people expecting the Nuggets to win this series? Were people expecting that the Nuggets were a better team? I was a little bit confused by a lot of the takes that I saw. A lot of the things about this affecting his MVP, which doesn't because that's a regular season award, and all these things about why Jokic isn't this. I was like, whoa, wait a minute, wait a minute. Did we not already establish that it's kind of weird that they're a 50-win team without their other 2 best players? That's let's just first off stick to basketball. I chose Golden State in 6. I think Denver, with Jokic and with the size that they have and the way they played throughout the season, I think they've had some elements to be able to make it an interesting series. I did also pick the Warriors for a reason. I picked them at 6 for a reason, and I would be very shocked if Denver won the series for a reason. Because this is not a great matchup. This is not a good matchup. This is a team of shooters. Team of sharp shooters with a big that is probably most comfortable in drop, and perimeter guys that do not defend well. That sounds mighty familiar, by the way. I'm trying to see if I go with the Jokic discourse first, or what happened. What happened first? Well, Steph came off the bench. Jordan Poole continued my questioning of what's going to happen when they get to their real starting lineup. And yeah, he's really growing up, which, spark note, well, not a spark note, but whatever, side note, Jordan Poole is not in the finalists for most improved player. So I said, I thought, when I went and really looked at most improved candidates, I thought with him being in the G League last year and him now having basically helped keep the Warriors afloat at the end of the season and doing what he did at the beginning of the season, I thought he would be one of the finalists for most improved. He's not even, I thought he would probably win it. He's not even a finalist. So there's that. Try guessing these awards. This is why it's tough. Anyways, yeah, he's just grown up so much. And I did want to note that outside of, in this whole Golden Dynasty era, outside of when the Warriors had Kevin Durant, you know they never really had a third guy outside of Clay and Steph that was like that, right? When it wasn't Kevin Durant, who was it? It was Harrison Barnes. It was Harrison Barnes who would, he was nice. He was a nice wing, and he would hit shots sometimes if it wasn't the NBA Finals, if it wasn't the 2016 NBA Finals. He was cool, but it wasn't a thing of, oh, give Harrison Barnes the ball and let him go work and do multiple things. That element is what KD brought to them. And so Jordan Poole is not KD, but having a third anything in a lineup with Steph and Clay is so crucial. And so Poole is a guy, one dribble pull up off of a screen, catch and shoot off of a screen. You have to chase him as well as having to chase Clay. And also he gets to the rim. Like he can get downhill. I remember very early in the season saying I was a little bit worried about the Warriors because Jordan Poole to me is not a number 2 on a championship team. If he's your second best player, if he's your second option, I didn't think he's cut like that yet. But when you have him out there with Steph and you have him out there with Clay, and you don't necessarily need a super defined number two. Like, it's not like the world is over if Jordan Poole doesn't produce. That's a sweet spot. That is a very, very sweet spot. And so I'm hoping, and finally we got to see it because the Warriors are healthy now and everybody's together. You got to see a little bit more. This lineup that I think you're going to see quite a bit, and you'll probably see it finish games even if it's able to happen. Steph, Clay, Poole, Wiggins, Dre. Again, especially because of defensively, it has to work with the team that they're playing, but they did play it. It did happen, and I like it. Especially when Draymond Green is able to just basically hold his own against Nikola Jokic. Jokic trying to back him down and do his fancy spins, and they don't work because Draymond's a very solid defender. When he can hold serve, when Dre can hold serve against whatever's happening, and not every team even has a post-up presence like that, oh boy, that lineup can get nasty. That lineup is going to be something that they're going to be basically learning how to unlock in the playoffs, since they didn't get to use it much throughout the season at all. I don't know how many minutes they played during the regular season, if any, but I've been waiting on that. It's here and it's beautiful. So that's a lot of Warriors talk, some Jordan Poole stuff. Steph Curry did not look great, but it's his first game back. He came off the bench and played in a month, so didn't really expect him to. I didn't really expect greatness. However, going against this Nuggets team, they can more or less tune up, even if it does end up being a 6-game series. It's pretty simple. Jokic, if he doesn't drop, Warriors gonna have open shots. He's at the level. The Warriors cut so much. They have guys that know when to cut. They have smart cutters, smartest cutting team in the league. So if Jokic comes up, it's up to a lot of other Nuggets guys who don't have great defensive instincts. They're not great defenders to begin with. It's up to them to keep up with the Warriors movement. So you're gonna have guys cutting back door, like a specific play that Draymond did last night, cutting from the right corner, I believe, after it looked like they were, I don't think they were trying to trap Poole, but Otto Porter slipped and it just kind of came together. The Nuggets defensively just don't have good matchups for this, and they would definitely have to catch the Warriors on a cold night, and the Nuggets would have to be hitting a lot of their shots for this to end up going the distance. But the Warriors end up blowing the top off of that. Clear advantage Golden State right now, and that was without Steph really doing anything. So yeah, but to the Jokic discourse, it's just kind of weird because, again, this is not a series I was expected to be won. And the main thing that everyone says about the stats being the reason he's going to win, it's only because of stats. That's literally from Nick Wright. And this bothers me because that's Nick Wright's whole trope, and that just shows you how effective it is. Even though you see people call him a clown or whatever, call him a clown for his analysis, whatever it is, you see his discourse come down because nobody really does that. Of course, you've got some graphs that are out there, and I don't agree with a graph that'll show Jokic as the best defender, but outside of that, that's not the main argument for his game or him being MVP. It's not, but that's what people battle against, and that's the knock on him when they lose to a team that's pretty much superior. I don't know. It just went a lot of weird places. It is what it is. It's probably gonna get MVP here in a couple of days or weeks, and the internet will digest that and be mad about it and move on until it happens again someday. So, because I don't think he's winning these straight. But yeah, so that's Warriors Nuggets, and that was the first slated night of game ones. Day 2 kicks off with Trae Young versus the Heat. So this is, I guess, where I'll talk a little bit about the play-in game, because the Cavaliers, it is unfortunate that they had to go out the way they did, but Trae added another city to his gauntlet, danced on the logo after crossing Karis LeVert, I believe, and shooting from the logo. It just got really ugly, but outside of all that stuff you probably have already seen, that is why, and I picked the Cavaliers to win, and I was almost right. Jared Allen was playing a role. The problem came with it being a one-game scenario. And so in one game, when you have a guy like Trae Young who does what he does, that's probably who you should go with. And that's why I went with him the first time. Specifically down the stretch of that Cavs game, they just started spamming screens, man. They started spamming screens and the Cavs didn't know what to do. They didn't know whether they should trap. They didn't know whether, and they just switched a lot for a while, which was the problem. The switching on Trae wasn't really effective, and they didn't know what they could do how they could cover it to slow him down. And before you know it, he was having a classic Trae Young playoff time game. And so that's how the Cavs got disposed of. Problem is, you can't really bring that shit to Miami. I'm sure there will probably be a Trae Young game throughout this series at some point, which is why I would say probably Miami in 5. But see, Bam knows how to switch. Like, Bam Adebayo is a mobile big that is elite at defense, and he can switch and he can come up. He can play at the level and he can come up, or he can fully switch and he can stay in front of the ball. He can close out to the corners. He can do a lot of things and fly around. And so a lot of those open shots that would be created by the chaos of what Trae Young can do is just it's a bit neutralized by Bam and Miami's defense as a whole. And so you end up with a Easter Sunday ass whooping. The Heat win by a lot. It's going to be difficult because the Hawks, they don't have good defense. They rely on that second-rated offense that is also reliant on Trae Young just being able to muck things up and finding something to exploit. But against Miami, I'm not sure that there is something that offense is going to be able to exploit. So I still think there'll be a closer game. There'll be closer games than 30-point games. There'll be a game that the Hawks can maybe even win. But to upset Miami, they would have to defy what the book says about how these teams match up. I don't see that happening. So that is how game 1 went, and it was out of hand very quickly. So I don't have a whole lot of things I want to say about that. Oh, but I do have a lot that I want to say about the Celtics and Nets. Got to look back and see how close my food is to being done. Because, like I said, this podcast would be shorter, and I was trying to get it all in before the food comes out. So Celtics and Nets happens. And I'm still stressed. I feel like as I just started to talk about it for the first time since the game earlier, it's like PTSD. A lot of things that I said in the prediction did come true on both sides, for the Nets and for the Celtics. A lot of the switching and trying to abuse Kyrie or Curry, small lineups that the Nets would run, and the Celtics trying to punish that. The Celtics very aggressive defense, the Nets lack of depth. The Andre Drummond and Bruce Brown lineups not being ideal, which led to Andre Drummond not being on the floor that much. They opted for Claxton. A lot of those things that I said on last week's pod came right out. Here's the problem, and this is why I didn't want to play the Nets first. Sometimes KD and or Kyrie just make shots, and it throws out everything that happened, even if it was for an entire game before that. And so that's how you get to the third or fourth quarter where Boston goes on a run and it looks like they're pulling away. But two things happen. So once again, Kyrie just tear up your defensive book. Doesn't matter if you have him in the corner and he's jab stepping and you have your hand in his face, he can pull up and make that shot. So that's just, there's nothing you can do about that. But then what I'm worried about, and what I've been worried about in terms of Boston getting out of the Eastern Conference, there's just stretches. And I said this exact statement probably 2 or 3 podcasts ago. I just remember where I say stuff, and I somebody got to count every time I reference an old pod. I said Boston has these stretches where they will just not score sometimes. They just have these stretches where maybe a guy's not hitting 3-pointers, or JT or JB just can't get something to go, and all of a sudden they're dead for 4 or 5 minutes. That is why I'm worried about them going against teams that coming into the season we thought were better. Because in the playoffs, that just has to happen a couple of times and you've lost a game by 1 or 2 points. And you can only lose 4 games by 1 or 2 points before you're out. Or, what if that costs you a playoff game? It almost cost them today, because there was a couple of stretches where Boston just couldn't score. One of the things that contributed to that is your guy Derek White. I talked about his shooting. I talked about being worried about it. I like him defensively and what he adds because we have so many other defenders. But he is our Bruce Brown. The Nets, just same way we ignore Bruce Brown, is how the Nets said we're going to ignore Derek White. That's how you found Derek White in the corner a lot, and you found him on the wing with his hands open, just sitting there waiting for the ball to come to him. And he was being ignored by the other 9 players on the court. It was to a point where I didn't know if his defensive contributions were worth having him out there, but it's also kind of like, well, what are your other options? Because you have a rotation and guys need rest. So there's just specific plays where the floor was closed up just enough to bother a layup, and that was the difference between the layup going in or not, is that there was able to be a second body in the vicinity because Derek White is just existing on the 3-point line. So that I was worried about. That came to pass. I was worried about the shot making, the legendary shot making of these guys. That came to pass. I'm mad that Nash at least was wise enough to not keep Drummond out there, because the Celtics were more or less ignoring Drummond on rolls. It was KD coming off of a screen, Drummond rolling down. You would have Horford or whoever just kind of in between those two. And if you want to throw a pass to him, it'll probably be a steal, or get caught under the basket and maybe fouled, which is a win for Boston. Or you have what would happen where one of those guys just pulls up for the jumper instead, and it's heavily contested, because Boston's defense was harassing. In the first half, it was almost a little bit over aggressive. There was a lot of fouls in this one. But I have not seen KD defended like that very much in my lifetime. I have specific memories of watching Durant back 10 years ago on Sunday, and so I've seen a lot of KD basketball. I don't have very many memories of seeing him struggle the way he did in around the first 3 or 3.5 quarters of this game. The pokeaways, the activity of Boston's hands on defense was just really bothering him. He was getting stripped. He was throwing turnovers. They bothered him in a way that I wish I could have faith that they will be able to bother him for the most of this series, because it's only won this game by 1. But I think you have to acknowledge Boston's defense on him, though. In the second half, of course, he got to his pull up a little bit more. Once he gets to his pull up, you're dead. Oh, and my food is ready. All right, so since my computer's audio program is on some bullshit tonight, I can't even hear what I was saying before. I was rudely interrupted by the food that I put a timer on. So I'm going to assume I was talking about Kevin Durant pull-ups and all the things that were going on. Celtics defense, I went through that. Kyrie. Look, at the end of the day, one of the things I said and why I picked the Celtics in 6 is because I'm seriously, as a team, I'm not that impressed by the Nets down the stretch. I am very impressed with Kyrie and KD, but in this game, I think it even showed. For the most part, like, Dragic did a good job hitting the shots that we were basically giving him, but for the most part, it's Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant hitting incredible shots, and occasionally hoping Curry is going to hit some shots if he's left open. There's a creative thing that they did, because at a certain point, the game was very close. It was winding down, and Kyrie was on fire. And what ends up happening there is it's time to blitz. It's time to trap. It's time to double. And whatever happens, because when Kyrie's in the zone, you would almost rather a decent or a good shooter take an open shot than Kyrie take any shot. Problem is, Nets mix it up. They started sending Curry to screen. They started sending KD to screen. And I was in so much pain, because I'm going, you can't trap. You cannot blitz Kyrie on a screen where one of those guys is screening for him. You can't. You have to stay single coverage, and so he might just shoot over your outstretched hand, which did end up happening a couple of times. Some of the lineups that the Nets tried to get away with, and they probably will continue to, but it's the guard lineup. It's another thing we talked about in the preview. Having 3 guys, Kyrie, Dragic, Curry, or Kyrie, just any combination of those 3 small guys. They did that. And I was begging Boston to punish them. You have to punish those lineups, whether it's with rebounding, whether it's with posting up and making them collapse and making them make decisions defensively. You got to punish that, because that can get deadly. That's a very quick lineup. On their offensive end, there's just a lot that they can do with that can get very difficult to guard. You end up in some bad situations, so that cannot be allowed to exist. They tried to post Jaylen Brown up 2 or 3 times on Bruce Brown. My issue with that was, god damn, we cannot throw a post-entry pass. There's no post-entry happening. I think 2 of them resulted in turnovers. They just went way too quick. It was almost as if they were just too eager to get it to happen. But that would have been nice, because Bruce Brown does not have the size for a Jaylen Brown. And man, it was just a good game that came down to the wire. Came down to some incredible defensive plays and 50-50 plays. And how about the win was improbable. So this is why you need to be here on watch parties. If you don't come to any other watch party, come to the Celtics and Nets one. Because that was insane. That was an insane last possession. The Nets have the lead. As a Celtics fan, I am groomed to believe that when a game gets close the way it was with that, and Boston is trailing and they need something to go right, I'm groomed to believe it's going to go wrong. It just has so many times. But the Celtics came up with a championship level defensive stop. Not letting Kyrie get to any of his open spots. Staying in front of KD, basically making him force a terrible shot at the end. And then not calling a timeout. Ime Udoka said that his team is well aware if they have a if they have a flow going, he's just gonna let it play out. The important part about that is the Nets couldn't game plan for anything or make any substitutions, so it was kind of a chaotic play. Marcus Smart made an excellent read because Claxton and one other guy closed out way too hard on him shooting on his potential shot, which, knowing our luck as Celtics, that just probably wouldn't have went in. He was able to put the ball on the floor, whip a very nice pass to Jason Tatum, who spun instinctively, so he didn't get a charge on Kyrie or didn't let Kyrie strip him. Spun, layup, game. Oh my goodness. Oh, they escaped. They escaped with game one. Not excited that they escaped with game one for no reason. It's not just because, oh, it's game one at home. It's because of how it happened. It was the fact that they were up double digits and Kyrie literally erased it pretty much on his own. Showing that type of performance can just throw everything out and you can win a game based off of that. The Nets can get a game off of that. I'm not sweating it. It just can't be game one. It can't be game one on the home floor. That's not the one that can go that way. Game two can go that way, or game three in Brooklyn can go that way. It cannot be game one and already pushing the Celtics closer to the ropes. So one thing that will be said is, oh, KD didn't play anywhere near decent until the second half and the Nets still won. And yes, I hear you, but to make up for that, Kyrie played damn near perfectly. It was to the point that he erased a double-digit deficit damn near on his own. It was a Kyrie run. That goes to the keys to the series, the keys to this to being a long series that I said would have to happen for the Nets and for the Nets to win it. It has to be perfect games from one or both of them to be able to compete and or win. They have to be perfect, because that roster is not deep. It's not that impressive, it's not that good, and it is clearly exploitable. So if Kyrie is not bailing you out, or if Kyrie and KD are not both really, really on, that's how they have to win 4 games. It has to be like Kyrie level performances. That has to come from them. And so if that doesn't happen, the Nets don't win. And that's why I picked the Celtics in 6. So of course, because the book could just get torn up, it could go 7. In hell, the Nets could even win it, but I will stick with my 6 prediction. I stick with my 6 prediction and hope Boston can clean up some of the things that happen on offense. Specifically, Derek White. I just want to see how important Derek White minutes actually are. I know he had a couple of good buckets, but boy, that really contributes to the offensive issues when he's standing on a wing and nobody on the floor is looking at him. Yeah, I just want to see what they do with that. All right, wow, I said a mouthful there. Boston 1-0. Boy, this series is going to traumatize me. As if I don't already have unpacked trauma from 2009 Celtics Bulls. This series is really gonna do me in. And then after this, should they get out of it, they'll have to deal with Giannis. That's the next series. That's still another one I don't really have much to say about. That one, I would just go ahead and be transparent with you that while the Bucks were blowing them out, I fell asleep. I did wake back up. I rose to see the Bulls had made it close, so I watched the end of it. Shout out Brook Lopez being back. His return, I had been pondering that through a lot of the season on these pods, wondering how healthy he would actually be. He is uber important to this series. He was uber important to uber important to this playoff run. He was uber important to this game. DeMar DeRozan not beating the allegations. This is aside from being super fascinated with how the Grizzlies would pan out in the playoffs. I was also fascinated to see DeRozan hitting these Wonderland tough shots that he survived all season off of, that have got him on an all NBA team. or that will have gotten him on an All-NBA team. I just wanted to see how that would work in the playoffs. It didn't work great in this game specifically. It did not work great. And yeah, the reason this is another one of those series, so this is probably the third one now that I just don't really have super interest in, because that's one where people will probably say, well, bad shooting nights, but the Bucks almost lost. Yeah, but look, the Bucks have a history of losing game ones. They lost to the Heat last year. Oh, sorry. They got close to losing to the Heat last year, and then they wiped the floor within the rest of the series. I really and truly think that the Bucks this was their game one. They're going to, it was a close one that after they lost the lead, and they almost lost it, but they didn't. And Chicago, if they were going to get one, that really was the one. I tweeted out kind of jokingly, but not really, at the beginning of the day that the Bucks were going to lose today, and this was going to be the only game that they lose. But Chicago didn't even get this one. So as far as where I'm at right now, I feel like the Bucks are going to clean house and just go ahead and go all the way. Now that the Bulls didn't get game one, kind of feel like they won't get one at all. But admittedly, full transparency, I do want to go back and see more about how DeMar DeRozan struggled. I don't believe, this is one I should look up now. I don't believe off the top of my head that Drew Holiday and or Chris Middleton had great nights and shooting nights. I'm talking about. Ding, ding, ding. I am right. 6 of 16 for Holiday, 4 of 13 for Middleton. Wow. This looks exactly like last year in the playoffs. This is what happens, right? How do those two around Giannis do? Shooting wise, because there's other things. There's assists. Drew had 6 assists. That's cool. And his defense. But how do they shoot? That's crucially important to their run. And last year it was very hit or miss. And so it looks like we're back to that now. But yeah, the Bucks jumped out to an early lead and lost it. I feel like they'll go ahead and clean house, but maybe, I'm not gonna knock you if you're optimistic and you think the Bulls, because you saw them compete in this one, you feel like they can continue to compete. Hell, maybe Drew and Chris will suck from the field the rest of the series, and that'll be just enough for some games to slip. That I'm willing to believe that. And after that, yeah, Pels and Suns. I felt no need to pay much attention. I feel no need to pay much attention to this series. I've already seen everything from the Pelicans I want to see this season. They're now up against a juggernaut. If anything, I'd like to see some nice nights from BI. The Pelicans didn't just completely die. They only ended up losing by 10, I believe, when they were down by much more. So they at least continued to fight, but Chris Paul decided that no, that's just not a thing. And the Suns killed it on both sides of the floor. Pelicans are heavily overmatched. I don't really have much to say, and I'm not one of the people who take what I see against 30 and a half win teams that seriously, because Phoenix, they can do everything flawlessly against a Pelicans team and then go up against a team in the Warriors that match them very well, and whatever happened in the first round not matter. That could happen. So whatever happens in Pelicans and Suns, or whatever developmental strides the Pelicans take in this series, that's probably something I'm more interested in later. For now, that's the series I get to kind of just rest on, to be honest. There's other podcasts, there's other people that will deeply analyze that series for you. I'm not interested, bro. I'm really not. I'm kind of, and I love BI. I love Brandon Ingram, but I'm kind of mad we didn't get the Clippers because Paul George got COVID right as the play-in was happening. So he didn't even get a chance to help the Clippers fight. Even if he he would have probably missed game one. But yes, the world where the Clippers and Tyronn Lue give the Suns some first round headaches, I didn't get that, so I'm just kind of boycotting. All right, well, that is it for game ones. As I said at the beginning, you can expect some randomly placed pods. Maybe you'll get one on a Thursday or something like that. I don't yet know if you'll ever have a time where there's not one on a Monday. If there's not one on a Monday, it's because I did one on like a Sunday or Saturday. But yeah, definitely some randomly placed ones throughout the playoffs, just pending the games, because I feel like waiting all week when some of this playoff drama happens to talk about it doesn't necessarily make sense. And I don't really want to make a bunch of main channel videos and say the same exact thing that I would say on the podcast anyways. I do main channel videos that are probably more play based. So yeah, there go your game ones. There go your game ones. Oh, and if I didn't drop a prediction, yeah, Suns in 4. Suns in 4. Bring that meme back. Make sure if you're listening on YouTube, hit the like button on this podcast. Like I said, Spotify and Apple Podcasts, keep the ratings up. We are at 700 plus on Spotify, so much appreciated. If I hadn't said it already, this podcast will continue going through the summer. So even once it slows down, the season slows down, that's when I'll just have more guests coming on and the show shall continue. So it's not stopping or going away just because basketball might be for a little while. Appreciate y'all, and I will see y'all on the next one.